This is how to make your DJI Mini 3 footage look more cinematic. If you're anything like me, you want your footage to look as professional and cinematic as possible. I'm going to give you a few tips that I have learned along the way that have greatly improved my drone footage. First tip, use ND filters. ND filters are going to be a necessity when it comes to getting cinematic footage on your DJI Mini 3. If you don't know what an ND filter is, it's basically like slapping a pair of sunglasses on your lens. Why is this important? The DJI Mini 3 has a fixed aperture of 1.7, which means the only two ways to adjust your exposure is going to be with your ISO and your shutter speed. Here's where you can run into trouble.
So say for instance you're shooting on a very bright day. Your ISO is cranked down to its lowest point of 100, but your image is completely blown out. The only thing left to do is to crank your shutter speed.
With your shutter speed cranked, your image is now going to be exposed properly, but when you come back to look at your footage, you're going to notice something is a bit off. Your overall image is going to look a little bit unnatural. The reason for this unnatural, almost shaky look is because when you have your shutter speed cranked to a certain point, whether that's 1/500th, 1/1000th, or 1/2000th of a second, everything in your image is going to be very sharp and in focus. Now you might ask, isn't being in focus and sharp good? Well, yeah, but not always. When shooting video, it's very important to look as natural as possible. If everything's sharp and in focus, that's not going to look very natural.
You're going to want to have some type of natural motion blur in your video, and the only way to get this is by having your shutter speed much lower.
I love that I brought this stupid stabilizer along just to not use it, so we're going to use it. A good rule of thumb is to double your shutter speed whatever your frame rate is. So if you're shooting at 60 frames a second, you're going to want your shutter speed at 1 1/20th of a second. If you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you're going to want your shutter speed at 1/48th of a second. Or 1/50th of a second, because a lot of cameras don't have that small of increments. By doing this, it's going to give you the most natural looking motion blur. The second tip I'm going to give you guys is all about your composition. In most cases, it's very important to keep your subject in the center of the frame. One good way to keep track of this is by turning on the grid on your controller. This will give you an accurate idea of where your center is. However, sometimes it's very easy to mess this up. The good thing about the Mini 3 is you have the 4K option. This will give you a little bit more wiggle room to adjust your framing in post. So if you get that one shot and your subject isn't perfectly in the center, you always have that option. I plan on going further into detail on different drone compositions and movements in a future video. However, here are a few quick tips to get you on your way. The first one is the reveal. This is going to be when you're coming around a building or a tree, or simply lifting your gimbal off the ground to reveal your subject. This is a great way to build suspense and give your subject an overall more dramatic feel. The second is probably one of my favorites, the orbit. This is going to be when you're putting your subject right in the center and you're going to be orbiting around it by pushing your left joystick to the right and your right joystick to the left. Now, add some speed and some dramatic music and this can look pretty cool. The final composition I have for you is the ground POV. The ground POV is good because it gives people a different perspective than they're used to. When people think drones, they think way up in the sky showing the landscape, which is great. But what they don't realize is there's way more that you can do to better tell a story. And this is why the ground POV is so great. Basically, all you're going to do is go as low to the ground as you can, lift your gimbal up a little bit facing your subject, and you're going to do a similar motion to the orbit. Tip number 3, simply shoot at the right time of day. The worst time of day to shoot is around 12 o'clock when the sun's beating straight down. It's just going to make your overall image look very flat. There's not going to be any shadows, and overall it just doesn't look very cinematic. The best time to shoot is what we call golden hour. This is right after sunrise or right before sunset. This is going to be when the sun's coming at you at an angle, giving you really nice warm tones and beautiful shadows. However, if you're like me and you love to sleep and you want to get a little bit more shut-eye and you miss the sunrise, and if for some reason you can't get to the sunset, it's not a big deal. You can still get these good shots later in the morning or earlier in the afternoon. The sun's still going to be coming at you at a bit of an angle at this time, so you can still get some good shadows. Number 4, consistent movement.
A lot of mistakes I've seen, as well as have made myself, is seeing that one long clip with no cuts with a ton of inconsistent movements. You'll see them flying straight and then quickly jump to the right, left, up or down, and overall this just doesn't look very cinematic.
So you're doing an orbit. You want to keep one consistent movement through the whole shot. Or say you're doing a reveal. You don't want to quickly jump to the left or right. This is just overall not going to look good. Want your movements to be slow and consistent. So next time you're out shooting, keep that in mind. The fifth and final tip I have for you guys is don't be afraid to fly close to objects. Take this video for instance. Look at how close I'm getting to these leaves and look at how good it looks. If you're gonna try this, I do have a few tips. First off, if you're gonna be flying anywhere near cliffs or solid objects, you're gonna wanna have your obstacle avoidance on. But if you're just gonna be flying in tighter spaces, such as this example here, you're gonna wanna turn it off. And this is for a few reasons. If you have it on and set to brake mode, sometimes the drone can get a little bit confuzzled and think that an obstacle is more of an obstruction than it actually is. And so it can think that leaves that are actually around it are in front of it and it can stop prematurely. If you have it set to bypass mode, the drone is automatically going to weave around the objects, which is fine when you're out in the open, but if you're in a tighter space like this and you want a nice smooth cinematic video, you're going to want to shut that off as well. However, you need to be careful when doing this. I actually have a secret to tell you guys. I crashed my drone last night. Yeah. I actually recorded this entire video yesterday, but my audio got messed up. For some reason, my microphone must not have been plugged in all the way. Yeah, it was super frustrating. On top of that, I crashed my drone when I was giving the example of flying close to objects. So that just shows how careful you have to be. I was actually climbing through, I had to climb through some mangroves to get it back. And I lost my ND filter. So it was overall, it wasn't a good experience, but hopefully your guys' experience with flying close to objects is a little bit better. Just use the tips that I've given you because I know from experience, obviously, that you have to watch the drone and see where those branches are. I actually have a bonus tip for you guys. Practice. Practice, practice, practice. As always, practice makes improvement with anything, including filmmaking. So take the tips I've given you today, go out and implement them, and create some videos. That's all I have for you guys today. If you did enjoy, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Check out the Instagram down below. I'll have it linked. If you're new, make sure you go down and subscribe and ring the notification bell so you get notified whenever I make any new tutorials or vlogs. After that, I will see you guys in the next video.
All right, and you know what? Just because we're at our golden hour right now, we're gonna go and we're gonna get a few shots, some bonus shots for the end, just to show off what I taught you in this video.